Welcome to the Cambridge Dads Podcast, brought to you by the Center for Families and the Let's Talk campaign at the Agenda for Children. We'd also like to thank the Cambridge Chronicle for their continued support of the program. I'm Luis Vasquez. In this episode of the podcast, we're joined by Charles Green, a loving and caring father in the community. Hey, Charles, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here. All right.
Tell me about your experience growing up with your father and how that has translated into the way you are a parent now with your own kids.
That's a beautiful question. I oftentimes think about that, because my father, he was a disciplinarian. One of his statements was, I don't care if you love me or respect me.
Oh.
He was saying if to do good and you don't, you're going to have to deal with me. And I always kept that. With me. Oftentimes I resented that because I was a knucklehead. So, I did a lot of things that me and him met up oftentimes. But growing up, it gave me a sense of right from wrong. So anytime that I did something, I would gauge it. I would say, is it right or is it wrong? Now, whether I did it or not, I always took that moment to decide whether it was right or wrong, and I got that from my father. Whereas my mom, she would show me all the love in the world.
And how did that dynamic come to be?
Well, my father he was a black and white person.
Mm-hmm.
There was no color. There was no shaded gray. You do, you don't. Where my mom, she was still a disciplinarian, but you would have to get to that level. You would have to be able to push her to that level, and I knew how to navigate through that. And but with my father, there was no games, there was no joking, there was nothing. There was some other things, like I tend to resent him because he worked a lot. He was a workaholic. I see where I get my work ethics from. But and my mom would be the one that takes the kids out all the time. And he wasn't able to join all the time. And, that kind of put some animosity in my heart towards him. But more so that when I got in trouble, that's when I seen him the most,
Right.
And that's what I attributed my father to, was being the disciplinarian and the person that handles the judgment. I would have to read a book and do an essay. I mean, his punishments were strict. Be in the room, back then it was Atari. I don't know how many people know Atari, but it was no Atari, no TV, nothing. You're in your room, you're going to read, you're going to do an essay, and I'm going to read it. If I don't like the essay, you're going to do it again.
What kinds of things would you take from your father that you could replicate as a parent now? Were there some positives that you are proud of still having, or that you've noticed you still have?
Well, I couldn't play games with my father. So because I couldn't play games with my father, and unfortunately I was able not to play games with my moms, but again, my mom was, she's the love, she was there. She gave me all the love in the world. And unfortunately, the world is cruel. You learn how to navigate around people's loves and take the soft spots of somebody. But I learned through my pops that, listen, the way I deal with my children now is I explain, and I say, you're doing something wrong right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is the right way. This is the wrong way. You're doing it this way, you're going to end up in this position. So I give them, when I'm talking to them, I give them understanding. And I learned that from my pops because he didn't want to hear the story. He didn't want to hear the reasonings. He didn't care for the reasonings. You knew it was wrong. It's game time.
You said you resented him growing up. Do you resent him now?
No, not at all. Me and my father has a real strong relationship. And it took a while. It took a while because I challenged my father every time. The rite of passage to manhood, where I felt I was big enough. Well, it happened and I lost, and that was another slice of humble pie for myself. But, I realized that, I'm a child, and as much as I resented him then, as I started growing older, as I started maturing and becoming more responsible, things that I went through with him translated into my adult life, into my work life, into my relationships. It might have not been like a father and son interaction, but it was similar. And I was able to deal with it using the tools that I used around my father. So as I seen it, I gained more respect because from youth, he was already training me to be a man.
So that's incredible. That's an incredible piece of insight there. It's something that not a lot of people get to experience, and some do. How old were you when you guys started to repair this relationship, and how did that come about? Did you seek him out? Was it the other way around? Was it when you were about to become a parent? Tell me more about that.
So when I was 16, my father said it's time to get a job. You're old enough to work.
As do most.
And yeah, and it just so happened he happened to be a general manager at a deli. So I got a job part-time after work at the deli. And the deli was attached to a restaurant, and I was also room service. And I really started collecting a paycheck at 16. It was then when I started working with my father, I started understanding what he was talking about with responsibilities and everything he taught. And I'm not saying that he sat there with a book and he was right and he was or he was perfect, because there was a lot of errors made in my mind, but his errors became my learning at the same time. And I didn't start realizing that until I started working with him and started seeing what he was talking about, about the responsibilities. Now, I still did a lot of things wrong, but I knew right from wrong. I started seeing him in a different light around 16.
How is he now with your kids? Is he a lot different than the way he treated you growing up?
Man, it's a night and day. I mean, they get gifts, he's a different guy with them. He's a grandfather now. He's a totally different person, but not really different. He's been the same. He still talks to me, and he still sheds his lights on me. But like he said, I'm a grown man now. We can have a different conversation because it's a man talking to a man and not a man talking to a boy.
Charles, thank you so much for joining the Cambridge Dads podcast. Appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your insight. That's incredible.
No problem. Anytime again. And like you said at the Boys to Men brunch, it takes a village, right?
100%.
Exactly. And I'm part of that village, bro.
Absolutely you are. Thank you so much.
You got it.
And that concludes this episode of the Cambridge Dads podcast. There are plenty of ways to stay connected with the program. You can find Cambridge Dads on Twitter and on Facebook. And you can also sign up for the Fatherhood Text Campaign by texting the word father to 95577. Text the word father to 95577. Thank you to the Center for Families, the Let's Talk campaign at the Agenda for Children, and the Cambridge Chronicle for helping us to get this out into the community. I'm Luis Vasquez. Have a wonderful holiday season. Opinions, views, or content expressed by any guest of the Cambridge Dads podcast is solely of their own and not said on behalf of the Center for Families, the Agenda for Children, the Cambridge Chronicle, or the City of Cambridge and other affiliations.